Alrighty, so welcome back and thanks again for coming. So recently I have featured a series of Japanese collectors, and I will add at least one more today, this time the collector H. Ando. So this particular specimen was collected in December of 1956 in Ogaki-machi, Hiroshima Prefecture. And Hiroshima Prefecture is here, kind of in the south end of this big island of Honshu. And Ogaki-machi was a town in that prefecture until 2004, when it merged with three other nearby towns into the city of Itajima, which takes up this island here. But if you look in closely and zoom in at the bottom of the island, you will still see some regions that have the name Ogaki-cho on them. And the CHO suffix, or CHOU, is a designation meaning a town. And you can see here that it's kind of equivalent to Machi, which is kind of in our locality. So that's presumably the area we're talking about. And just as a fun sided bonus, here's a picture of that island from Google Maps. So it looks like a really pretty spot. So our specimen here was identified as the moss Hypnum sakura-ei. The genus name Hypnum comes from the Greek word hypnos, meaning sleep. And that is because this moss was used historically to fill cushions and mattresses. And it was also believed to have some sleep-inducing properties, which I thought was interesting. The species name sakura-ei comes from the Japanese word sakura, or cherry blossom tree. And this genus Hypnum is found worldwide on every continent except Antarctica. But our particular species is found mostly along the Asian Pacific. So there's sightings in Japan, China, Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, and also the Aleutian Islands, so kind of the Northern Pacific. And I did find this one picture of our particular species growing in the wild here, actually in Japan. So H. Ando was Hisatsugo Ando, and he was born in 1922, presumably in Japan. But sadly, I wasn't able to get as much detail on his life as some of the other ones. A couple of the memorial articles just didn't have the same details as some of the that you usually see. And one article that sounded really promising, I was not able to get a copy of. Our library does have that journal that it was in, but our subscription ended earlier in the year, and then a couple issues later that year is when his obituary was listed. So sadly, I could not get access to it. So I'll share what I can find, but regretfully it won't be as much as usual. So again, I don't have any details on his early education, but in 1956, we do know that he was a PhD student at Hiroshima University. And that school was established in 1949 when 8 higher level schools were merged into one prefectural university. And this was after World War II. And then a medical college, medical school was incorporated in the 50s. Now, buildings of several of those constituent schools were damaged by the atomic bomb that was dropped on the city in 1945. And you can see some pictures of the destruction here. So some of the structures were rebuilt after the war, but most of the campus moved to the city of Higashi, Hiroshima, which is nearby. And that's where the school is mainly based today. So Ando was studying the moss genus Hypnum. And while at the university, he reached out to other researchers, including W.B. Schofield, who was at that time a master's student studying Hypnum in Canada and Alaska. And they began to correspond and exchange specimens, information, and literature. In the 1960s through the 80s, he was a professor at the Hiroshima University, and he continued to study bryophytes, including the relationships between taxa in Japan and North America. He became an expert on the genus Hypnum and wrote extensively on its family Hypnaceae. And he published a series of articles on Japanese and Asian Hypnum in the 1950s and a world monograph of the genus in parts over 20 years. He also served as a guide and mentor for many students at the university, encouraging them to study biology and taxonomy. In 1970, Ando spent some time in Paris studying specimens, type specimens, especially those from the Hypnum genus. He was one of the people who proposed establishing a Bryological Society in Japan, which was set up in 1972. Today, that society has over 500 members, including researchers, experts, and amateurs. And he edited the proceedings of the Bryological Society and served as its 5th president. In 1980, he attended the International Botanical Congress in Seattle, Washington, and he took a field trip to the Haida Gwaii archipelago, which is off the coast of British Columbia, where he saw a number of rare bryophytes, including Takakia, which is that genus we talked about earlier. In 1985, he retired from Hiroshima University and joined the Elizabeth University of Music, which is a small Catholic school in Hiroshima that was actually named after its patron, the Queen Elizabeth of Belgium, in 1951. And at that school, Ando taught French and introductory biology, and he also continued to publish findings from his bryological research. So interestingly, in addition to being an expert on mosses, he was known as an enthusiastic philatelist. So he collected stamps, especially biological stamps. And he was also a skilled magician. It's said that he would put on demonstrations at bryological gatherings. And this picture is actually a picture of him congratulating the winners of a bowling tournament for students. So it seems like he was a very fun guy. So sadly, Ando spent the last 8 years of his life under medical supervision following a stroke, and he passed away in 2005 at the age of 83. So per Tropicos, he described or revised 97 different taxa names. A lot of those are from that Hypnum genus and the family Hypnaceae. He published over 100 scientific works and was known for his meticulous studies and accurate drawings, often made using a camera lucida. And there is at least one genus named after him. So the moss genus Andoa, and at least a few species names. So these are all in the Hypnaceae family. So I felt pretty confident that's what that Andoa is after, but I'm sure there's probably more. His name is just so short, it's kind of tricky to sort out what is necessarily named after him. So specimen wise, there's just over 1,000 in the Bryophyte portal for now. I didn't find anything in the lichen portal, 182 in our Cernic vascular portal, and just a little over 200 in GBIF. But I do have to say, as a side note, that the packaging of some of his specimens was quite interesting. I think this is junk mail. There's a Japanese newspaper. I'm not exactly sure what's going on up here. When I first looked at this picture in the database, I thought someone was holding the specimen in their hand when they're taking the picture, but it's actually some sort of newspaper, I think, article or ad. So really kind of interesting mix. So that is Dr. Hisatsugo Ando, and I'll end again with a short quote from his longtime collaborator and friend, W.B. Schofield, who said, "Professor Hisatsugo Ando was a superlative human being. He was sensitive, helpful, open to new experiences, and always a good friend. He was unquestionably one of the great bryologists of his time. His scholarly and meticulous studies of the moss genus Hypnum are a contribution for all time and will serve as a foundation for all future studies of the genus." So thanks again for listening.